Section 1 of Handbook of Nature Study. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jill Engel. Handbook of Nature Study by Anna Botsford Comstock. Part 1. The Teaching of Nature Study. What Nature Study is. 2. The relation of Nature Study to science. In Nature's infinite book of secrecy, a little can I read. Shakespeare. What Nature Study is. Nature Study is, despite all discussions and perversions, a study of nature. It consists of simple, truthful observations that may, like beads on a string, finally be threaded upon the understanding, and thus held together as a logical and harmonious whole. Therefore, the object of the nature study teacher should be to cultivate in the children powers of accurate observation and to build up within them understanding. What nature study should do for the child. First, but not most important, nature study gives the child practical and helpful knowledge. It makes him familiar with nature's ways and forces, so that he is not so helpless in the presence of natural misfortune and disasters. Nature study cultivates the child's imagination, since there are so many wonderful and true stories that he may read with his own eyes, which affect his imagination as much as does fairy lore. At the same time, nature study cultivates in him a perception and a regard for what is true, and the power to express it. All things seem possible in nature, yet this seeming is always guarded by the eager quest of what is true. Perhaps half the falsehood in the world is due to lack of power to detect the truth and to express it. Nature study aids both in discernment and expression of things as they are. Nature study cultivates in the child a love of the beautiful. It brings to him early a perception of color, form, and music. He sees whatever there is in his environment, whether it be the thunderhead piled up in the western sky, or the golden flash of the oriole in the elm, whether it be the purple of the shadows on the snow, or the azure glint on the wing of the little butterfly. Also, what there is of sound he hears. He reads the music score of the bird orchestra, separating each part and knowing which bird sings it. And the patter of the rain, the gurgle of the brook, the sighing of the wind in the pine, he notes and loves, and becomes enriched thereby. But, more than all, nature study gives the child a sense of companionship with life out of doors, and an abiding love of nature. Let this latter be the teacher's criterion for judging his or her work. If nature study, as taught, does not make the child love nature and the out of doors, then it should cease. Let us not inflict permanent injury on the child by turning him away from nature instead of toward it. However, if the love of nature is in the teacher's heart, there is no danger. Such a teacher, no matter by what method, takes the child gently by the hand and walks with him in paths that lead to the seeing and comprehending of what he may find beneath his feet or above his head. And these paths, whether they lead among the lowliest plants, or whether to the stars, finally converge and bring the wanderer to that serene peace and hopeful faith that is the sure inheritance of all those who realize fully that they are working units of this wonderful universe. Nature study as a help to health. Perhaps the most valuable practical lesson the child gets from nature study is a personal knowledge that nature's laws are not to be evaded. Wherever he looks, he discovers that attempts at such evasion result in suffering and death. A knowledge thus naturally attained of the immutability of nature's must and shall not is in itself a moral education. That the fool as well as the transgressor fares ill in breaking natural laws makes for wisdom in morals as well as in hygiene. Out-of-door life takes the child afield and keeps him in the open air, which not only helps him physically and occupies his mind with sane subjects, but keeps him out of mischief. It is not only during childhood that this is true, for love of nature counts much for sanity in later life. This is an age of nerve tension, and the relaxation which comes from the comforting companionship found in woods and fields is, without doubt, the best remedy for this condition. Too many men who seek the out-of-doors for rest at the present time can only find it with a gun in hand. To rest and heal their nerves, they must go out and try to kill some unfortunate creature. The old story of sacrificial blood. Far better will it be when, through properly training the child, the man shall be enabled to enjoy nature through seeing how creatures live, rather than watching them die. It is the sacred privilege of nature study to do this for future generations, and for him thus trained shall the words of Longfellow's poem to Agassiz apply. And he wandered away and away, with nature the dear old nurse, who sang to him night and day the rhymes of the universe. And when the way seemed long, and his heart began to fail, she sang a more wonderful song, or told a more wonderful tale. What nature study should do for the teacher. During many years I have been watching teachers in our public schools in their conscientious and ceaseless work, and so far as I can foretell, the fate that awaits them finally is either nerve exhaustion or nerve atrophy. The teacher must become either a neurasthenic or a clam. I have had conversations with hundreds of teachers in the public schools of New York State concerning the introduction of nature study into the curriculum, and most of them declared, "Oh, we have not time for it. Every moment is full now." Their nerves were at such a tension that with one more thing to do, they must fall apart. The question in my own mind during these conversations was always, how long can she stand it? I asked some of them, did you ever try a vigorous walk in the open air in the open country every Saturday or every Sunday of your teaching year? "Oh, no," they exclaimed, in despair of making me understand. "On Sunday we must go to church or see our friends, and on Saturday we must do our shopping or our sewing. We must go to the dressmaker's lest we go unclad. We must mend and darn stockings. We need Saturday to catch up." Yes, catch up with more cares, more worries, more fatigue, but not with more growth, more strength, more vigor, and more courage for work. In my belief, there are two, and only two occupations, for Saturday afternoon or forenoon for a teacher. One is to be out of doors, and the other is to lie in bed, and the first is best. Out in this, God's beautiful world, there is everything waiting to heal lacerated nerves, to strengthen tired muscles, to please and content the soul that is torn to shreds with duty and care. To the teacher who turns to nature's healing, nature study in the schoolroom is not a trouble. It is a sweet fresh breath of air, blown across the heat of radiators and the noisome odor of overcrowded small humanity. She who opens her eyes and her heart nature-ward, even once a week, finds nature study in the schoolroom a delight and an abiding joy. What does such a one find in her schoolroom, instead of the terrors of discipline, the eternal watching and eternal nagging to keep the pupils quiet and at work? She finds, first of all, companionship with her children, and second, she finds that, without planning or going on a far voyage, she has found health and strength. When and why the teacher should say, "I do not know." No science professor in any university, if he be a man of high attainment, hesitates to say to his pupils, "I do not know," if they ask for information beyond his knowledge. The greater his scientific reputation and erudition, the more readily, simply, and without apology he says this. He, better than others, comprehends how vast is the region that lies beyond man's present knowledge. It is only the teacher in the elementary schools, who has never received enough scientific training to reveal to her how little she does know, who feels that she must appear to know everything, or her pupils will lose confidence in her. But how useless is this pretense in nature study! The pupils, whose younger eyes are much keener for details than hers, will soon discover her limitations, and then their distrust of her will be real. In nature study any teacher can with honor say, "I do not know," for perhaps the question asked is as yet unanswered by the great scientists. But she should not let her lack of knowledge be a wet blanket thrown over her pupils' interest. She should say frankly, "I do not know. Let us see if we cannot together find out this mysterious thing. Maybe no one knows it as yet, and I wonder if you will discover it before I do." She thus conveys the right impression, that only a little about the intricate life of plants and animals is yet known, and at the same time she makes her pupils feel the thrill and zest of investigation. Nor will she lose their respect by doing this, if she does it in the right spirit. For 3 years I had for comrades in my walks afield 2 little children, and they kept me busy saying, "I do not know." But they never lost confidence in me or in my knowledge. They simply gained respect for the vastness of the unknown. The chief charm of nature study would be taken away if it did not lead us through the borderland of knowledge into the realm of the undiscovered. Moreover, the teacher, in confessing her ignorance and at the same time her interest in a subject, establishes between herself and her pupils a sense of companionship which relieves the strain of discipline, and gives her a new and intimate relation with her pupils, which will surely prove a potent element in her success. The best teacher is always one who is the good comrade of her pupils. Nature study, the elixir of youth. The old teacher is too likely to become didactic, dogmatic, and bossy if she does not constantly strive with herself. Why? She has to be thus 5 days in the week, and, therefore, she is likely to be so 7. She knows arithmetic, grammar, and geography to their uttermost, and she is never allowed to forget that she knows them. And finally, her interests become limited to what she knows. After all, what is the chief sign of growing old? Is it not the feeling that we know all there is to be known? It is not years which make people old. It is ruts and a limitation of interests. When we no longer care about anything except our own interests, we are then old. It matters not whether our years be 20 or 80. It is rejuvenation for the teacher, thus growing old, to stand ignorant as a child in the presence of one of the simplest of nature's miracles, the formation of a crystal, the evolution of the butterfly from the caterpillar, the exquisite adjustment of the silken lines in the spider's orb web. I know how to make magic for the teacher who is growing old. Let her go out with her youngest pupil and fall on her knees before the miracle of the blossoming violet and say, "Dear nature, I know not of the wondrous life of these, your smallest creatures. Teach me," and she will suddenly find herself young. Nature study as a help in school discipline. Much of the naughtiness in school is a result of the child's lack of interest in his work, augmented by the physical inaction that results from an attempt to sit quietly. The best teachers try to obviate both of these, rather than to punish because of them. Nature study is an aid in both respects, since it keeps the child interested and also gives him something to do. In the nearest approach to an ideal school that I have ever seen, for children of 2nd grade, the pupils were allowed, as a reward of merit, to visit the aquaria, or the terrarium, for periods of 5 minutes, which time was given to the blissful observation of the fascinating prisoners. The teacher also allowed the reading of stories about the plants and animals under observation to be regarded as a reward of merit. As I entered the schoolroom, there were 8 or 10 of the children at the windows watching eagerly what was happening to the creatures confined there in various cages. There was a mud aquarium for the frogs and salamanders, an aquarium for fish, many small aquaria for insects, and each had one or two absorbingly interested spectators who were quiet, well-behaved, and were getting their nature study lessons in an ideal manner. The teacher told me that the problem of discipline was solved by this method, and that she was rarely obliged to rebuke or punish. In many other schools, watching the living creatures in the aquaria or terrarium has been used as a reward for other work well done. The relation of nature study to science. Nature study is not elementary science as so taught, because its point of attack is not the same. Error in this respect has caused many a teacher to abandon nature study and many a pupil to hate it. In elementary science, the work begins with the simplest animals and plants and progresses logically through to the highest forms. At least, this is the method pursued in most universities and schools. The object of the study is to give the pupils an outlook over all the forms of life and their relation one to another. In nature study, the work begins with any plant or creature which chances to interest the pupil. It begins with the robin when it comes back to us in March promising spring, or it begins with the maple leaf which flutters to the ground in all the beauty of its autumnal tints. A course in biological science leads to the comprehension of all kinds of life upon our globe. Nature study is for the comprehension of the individual life of the bird, insect, or plant that is nearest at hand. Nature study is perfectly good science within its limits, but it is not meant to be more profound or comprehensive than the capabilities of the child's mind. More than all, nature study is not science belittled as if it were to be looked at through the revered opera glass in order to bring it down small enough for the child to play with. Nature study, as far as it goes, is just as large as is science for grown-ups, and may deal with the same subject matter, and should be characterized by the same accuracy. It simply does not go so far. To illustrate, if we are teaching the science of ornithology, we take the first, the Archaeopteryx, then the swimming and the scratching birds, and finally reach the songbirds, studying each as a part of the whole. Nature study begins with the robin, because the child sees it and is interested in it, and he notes the things about the habits and appearance of the robin that may be perceived by intimate observation. In fact, he discovers for himself all that the most advanced book of ornithology would give concerning the ordinary habits of this one bird. The next bird study may be the turkey in the barnyard, or the duck on the pond, or the screech owl in the spruces, if any of these happen to impinge upon his notice and interest. However, such nature study makes for the best of scientific ornithology, because by studying the individual birds thus thoroughly, the pupil finally studies a sufficient number of forms so that his knowledge, thus assembled, gives him a better comprehension of birds as a whole than could be obtained by the routine study of the same. Nature study does not start out with the classification given in books, but in the end it builds up a classification in the child's mind which is based on fundamental knowledge. It is a classification like that evolved by the first naturalists. It is built on careful personal observations of both form and life. End of section 1. Recording by Jill Engel.